You've released a new instructional on takedowns and standing skills for jiu-jitsu. Just at a high level, using Nicholas as an example, what are some key ideas about takedowns?
Okay, first, whenever people talk about standing position in jiu-jitsu, they always say, "Oh, I need to learn some takedowns," but it's never a question of just learning the takedowns. It's learning the prerequisites to the takedowns. The takedowns are more or less like an afterthought. Um, you've got to begin with stance, motion, the ability to engage in grip and contact, get your opponent out of balance, and then comes the takedowns. The takedowns in jiu-jitsu are mostly divided into lower body takedowns, tackles to the legs, single legs, double legs, to a lesser degree, high crotch in jiu-jitsu, and then upper body takedowns, which are mostly judo derived. Nicholas had to start more or less at the ground. He didn't even know how to come out and make grips or hold a stance. So he had to learn every element of it. And the fact he was able to do so in 6 months is just incredible.
Can you comment on the upward posture that seems to work for jiu-jitsu?
The matches in jiu-jitsu are much longer than the matches in wrestling. In addition, there are many kinds of submission threat which are not there in wrestling. So the stance has to be significantly changed. In wrestling, they favor generally a very low crouch because the vast majority of attacks are tackles to the legs. So anyone who stands upright in wrestling tends to get heavily punished by being taken down immediately with a leg tackle. In jiu-jitsu, the matches are so much longer, it would be difficult in a 40-minute match, for example, to maintain a bent over crouch. You'd be exhausted. There's also problems associated with submission holds. There are many forms of submission hold, guillotines, darts, etc., where if your head comes down too low, you become a little vulnerable to this. And so the stances in jiu-jitsu competition tend to be much more upright, more like judo and Greco. So right off the bat, you see the stance is different. The motion tends to be much slower and more evenly paced because you've got to be able to do this for long periods of time. So the number of fakes per minute, the number of shots attempted per minute is usually much lower. So these are obvious differences. The biggest difference, however, has nothing to do with that. It has to do with tactics. In jiu-jitsu, the scores will be judged by what happens after the takedown. In the case of ADCC, you can take someone down in ways that would score in both wrestling and judo, and possibly even win the match in the case of judo, and it would score 0 in ADCC because of the nature of the rules. The whole idea of ADCC scoring is to demonstrate control after the takedown. It's what happens in the critical 3 seconds after the takedown that creates the score. In judo and in wrestling, the emphasis is placed on the takedown itself. In jiu-jitsu, the emphasis is placed on the aftermath of the takedown. That's where the score is allocated. And that can be a period of up to 3 seconds. Now, 3 seconds doesn't sound like much, but in a scramble after a takedown, 3 seconds is a fucking eternity. It goes on forever. And so you will see many examples of takedowns that, as I said, would score very well in judo and wrestling, but don't score at all in ADCC. And so the whole skill becomes packaging the standing position in terms of the takedowns themselves, but in particular, preparing the athletes for that critical 3 seconds after the takedown. That's why many people who are very fine wrestlers struggle in ADCC. They take people down by wrestling metric all the time, but don't score under ADCC rules.